Hello and welcome to the 60 for 30 project. My name is Xander Miller. I am sitting here with John Gehring. How are you?
Good.
Awesome, that's good to hear. Well, we're gonna get started right away and just I gotta ask, what neighborhood around Kenosha are you from?
This immediate neighborhood that the library is located in.
So right
my
around,
family was on 75th Street and 33rd Avenue in Kenosha, about like 4 or 5 blocks, a little northeast of here.
okay, and we're at Southwest Library, so just same
Yes.
neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And how long have you been around the area?
All my life. I was born and raised in Kenosha.
Okay. So, what has been your experience, or what have you seen as Kenosha's culture?
Kenosha's culture. Very mixed, very multi-ethnic, very multiracial, very changing, influenced by neighboring states. A lot different from when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s.
How so? What's different?
I'm multi-ethnic, mostly on my father's side. I'm Prussian, German, Scottish, Irish, English, maybe Dutch, and half Italian. But from my generation onward, my generation down, a lot of my cousins have married outside their race, and so now, mostly from my mother's side, and we become multiracial on my mother's side. Multi-ethnic initially from my father, multiracial now from my mother's side. I have Korean cousins, Japanese cousins, Mexican cousins, Russian. We have everything in our that side of the family.
Okay. How is that?
And I'm sure it's, not to interrupt, I'm sure it's probably similar in some other families as well. So.
Mm-hmm. So how has that changed your perspective just over time, being born and raised in Kenosha?
It was kind of interesting to see what changes were going to come, or how, or why. But I was set for them. The true constant is change, and I was kind of set for things like that. Not very surprised in the long run as to how things have turned out. I think it's good. I think the direction is good.
Okay. So let's go back to, we talked about change and from being born and raised in Kenosha. What was it like initially in Kenosha for you?
Well, my mother was Italian, and we would go on trips. My parents would take me and my brothers and sister out on trips, and we would go past buildings and things, and my parents would explain them to us, and once in a while she would say, like, this is the Elks Club in downtown Kenosha, but you're not allowed to join that club. And then we're looking at each other, and we asked why later. And then the Italian American Club, believe it or not, you had to be all Italian, and I'm only half, and she says you can't join this club. So you're driving around and you're wondering, like, how or why, or you're 7 or 8 years old, 9 years old, and you're trying to figure out why you're not allowed to join certain clubs, and it was all because of my ethnicity. Later on, I was able to join the Elks Club and the Italian American and others, Danish Brotherhood, because they all relaxed their rules because they were looking for membership. My grandfather was a member of the Elks Club, but he is the German and the Prussian, and there was no problem there. He was a bank vice president, but his grandson I could not join at the time, but later on, eventually I was able to because of the rules being relaxed at these organizations.
So Kenosha was really divided ethnically like that?
Yes,
split?
in fact, to give you a good example, a lot of the Catholic churches cater to certain ethnicities. I think St. Thomas, I would ask my father about St. Thomas. He says, when my mom would say, well, that's mostly German and Irish. Very, very ethnic. St. Casimir's was Polish. Mount Carmel and Holy Rosary were Italian. That's where my mother went to church. St. Anthony's, I think, was Slavic, but each church was extremely ethnic. They spoke Italian for the Mass at Mount Carmel. And the neighborhood around the churches was that ethnicity. So, I mean, that's what I was raised in, and that's one major change I saw, is that little by little, other people were moving into, other ethnicities were moving into the neighborhood, so that was changing too. In Milwaukee, just to stray a little bit, St. Joseph at Spasiglia was a Polish church, but now I think it's Latino neighborhood. So I mean, that's changed, that's time, that's what happens. Things don't always stay constant, so. But very, very strong ethnic neighborhoods.
And that's how Kenosha was. And slowly, people moved in. People, I want to use the word integrated, has a different context usually, but people integrated together is kind of what I'm seeing over time.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
The house that I mentioned, the neighborhood that I was born and raised in, was somewhat of a new subdivision in 1950. And I saw it there, where you saw lots of new faces and new people and new homes, new businesses around there to kind of cater to the area. So yeah, that's all part of the change. Things happen that way.
Okay. So as people mixed and integrated together, how did the mood of Kenosha change as that happened?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think it took a while for the mood to change. I think it was a surprise probably to a lot of families, but they eventually, in time, it took a while, accepted it. That's the way I see it. I mean, it's just, I was probably part of the reason for some of that change, but you try to be a model kid. You try to do the best you can and, make everybody proud, so.
Mm-hmm. And so as it moved from, became multi-ethnic and then multiracial, that, same ideas of...
It became multi-ethnic first, that's okay. A good point, and then eventually, in time, became multiracial.
Mm-hmm.
My mother obviously did not marry an Italian, and then I would ask her, like, what's the big deal about that? I was still a young kid, and she has two brothers, my Uncle Joe Andre and my Uncle Louis, and then my mom would say, who did your uncles marry? I says, Italians. She basically kind of said, like, I rest my case. I don't think it's that way anymore, Xander. I think people are not tied to having to marry within their own ethnicity. But back in the 50s, I think a lot of things changed in the 50s because of World War II and the Korean War. A lot of war brides were brought back over to people in their home cities, and that was also true for Kenosha as well.
Mm-hmm.
If a war can make a major change like that, but I had heard and read that it did, so.
So yeah, 1950s into World War II, into Cold War, into Korean War, into how did other wars also? Because there was Korean War, being forgetting the year for the Vietnam War and such, but war was kind of a thing that just kind of happened over time. How did those change Kenosha as well? You already mentioned that people brought home wives from overseas. So how did that experience change things?
It kind of changed the flavor of the city a little bit. It kind of showed that there were other possibilities. My mom wasn't the first to marry outside her ethnicity, but a lot of her cousins later on chose that. And then I would say late 40s, early 50s, you saw more varying ethnic marriages. I think you saw things change that way. And I think because of that, choosing outside your ethnicity, I think it made it a little easier, this is my theory, for the races to have, like you said, mixed race, mm-hmm. multiracial situations, because first you have to be satisfied and be accepted multi-ethnically, and then it makes multiracial a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier. That's my theory.
Well, yeah, because after the 50s, we get into the 60s and civil
Oh,
rights movements.
oh,
How,
yes.
how was that
Yes.
time?
That was kind of different. I remember a lot like the Love Children and things like that, Woodstock and things like that was, and I was late 60s, I was just getting into college, and that was a whole different time, a whole different generation. Plus I was like a lot of my other classmates, we were moved up a year in school, so now I'm experiencing a lot of this even earlier than like most other people would, certain grades and schooling and things like that. Yeah, it was pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
You could even see, I went to Parkside, you could even see an enormous amount of change at Parkside. That was all, but enlightening, and I really appreciate it, and I was glad that I was exposed to a lot of that.
Yeah,
But
what
those
kinds
were
of
really different times. You could see that change was coming. People are all working towards change. And then, of course, you have to sprinkle in the Vietnam War in that as well, too. So,
yeah, what kinds of change happened at Parkside?
Staff, a varied staff there, a lot of different students, different types of students. Saw more blacks in my class than I did when I was a student at Tremper. A lot of them might have come down from Racine because there were 3 campuses, and I think there were 3 campuses, and some students had to take classes from Racine in Kenosha. Some people had to go to Racine to take classes, but there were 3 campuses in the area, and that alone, having students kind of shuttled between different buildings, plus the physical buildings themselves, there's more buildings and more land, and yeah, it's changed quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. So going back to, well, I say going back, but going into more recent times, modern times, and we've seen a lot of just strife in Kenosha, especially the past year. How has your experience with, having changed through the 50s, changed through the 60s, affected how you view like 2020, 2021 with Kenosha?
Well, I thought we were kind of going in the right direction, but maybe that must have been misplaced because, we did have certain situations that kind of changed the city last year. But hold a lot of hope out. I think we're still headed in the right direction. There have been some major advances. I think we're on the right course. I think we're doing better. I think we're doing well. I was saddened to see my Danish Brotherhood Club destroyed, but I guess that was just all part of the protesting. It's just that it's just a sad experience for me and my fellow members. So.
Mm-hmm. So a club you were part of was.
We did a lot of good. We did a lot of good for the city,
Mm-hmm.
and well, maybe some of the people that had destroyed it weren't from the area, but I thought we were, as a club, as a group in that area, that we had done quite well. Wouldn't have joined some of these clubs if I didn't think they were going to be a positive influence on the city and the cities they're in, even in the club I belong to in Racine. So.
Mm-hmm. So you say you think we're still going in the right direction.
I do.
But what direction do you think Kenosha needs to go in?
Boy, those are tough ones there. I think they have to be knowledgeable on the whole situation, all the different situations that are coming up. I think they have to be accepting to a certain point, not that they can't protest or question some things. I think maybe we might need a little more clear leadership as to directions that some groups want to go and some organizations want to, their accomplishments, their hopeful accomplishments. But I think it's just a question of communication and people's knowledge of the whole situation and understanding directions that groups want to go to, government wants to go to, education wants to lead us, things like that. I think as long as we are on board, understanding it, and able to question it, I think we'll be okay.
Okay. So a mutual understanding, kind of better communication with each other.
Yes.
That's kind of where you're thinking.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, say even 5 years from now, what do you want to see in Kenosha?
Maybe some improvements in our downtown, some improvements in our uptown, some improvements in the large area that used to be the Nash American Motors Chrysler complex. A lot of people wondering how that's going to turn out. That might be a 4 or 5, 10-year plan as to what the city's thoughts are on that. But those are key areas, the car plant, uptown, downtown, because that's where a lot of people kind of circulate and they want to see positive improvements in those particular areas,
So
which
that
actually
way-
has a strong influence on neighborhoods. So hopefully neighborhoods can be accepting, the people can understand it. Here we go again with the communication thing, and they're aware of the direction, they understand it. And not that they can't protest or object, it's just that it would be nice to see some positive action in those areas.
Yeah. But all of that, it sounds like, starts with dialogue, is kind of what
Yes.
you're saying here.
Yes, it does. They may want to put a housing project up in the uptown area, and that's obviously definitely going to influence the neighborhood north, south, east, west. So hopefully the people are understanding of that, and people that want to move into that area would appreciate the fact that there's a potential housing project that's going to go up there, and that there's no negative situations developing because of that. But that again is all based on knowledge, communication, and acceptance of the people in the surrounding area,
Okay.
and how well our local government handles everything too. So
Yeah. So, interesting. I know there's talks of it as the Kenosha Innovation Neighborhood. It's like the talk of what the city's going for right now.
is that the one, the old Chrysler plant? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, what you'd see is more
Boy, that's got a
communication.
lot of potential because of its location, the amount of land, businesses I've heard that are interested in going in there. Here we go again, like apartment complexes or condos or housing units of some type, which it seems like everybody can use, all cities can use. Nice neighborhood, lots of possibilities for different businesses to go to there. But that's a prime property and a large property. I don't even know if you could have one developer for that or what, like I say, the city's plans are for that, but hopefully a lot of things can be checked off a list of what most people are hoping it'll become.
Yeah. There's a lot of hope there. Is hope, a chance to do it right is kind of like what we're going for with communication, the engagement, the dialogue on both ends of the city and city protesters, people living in the area, neighborhoods.
Being an artist, I can see the finished product. And when you drive by that property, I can see like apartment units, condos, I can see little businesses, very organized, but maybe it's hard for others to do that. And then the other thing is, how do you get from point A to point B and point C? That's the whole key, is what is it going to take for people driving by thinking like, boy, I wish they had this over there, or I wonder if they're ever going to put one of these over there, and maybe a lot of that will come. But it's getting the wheels rolling, getting people in place, builders, and getting from A to B to C. So I guess that's the hardest part, is all the behind the scenes things, the communication thing. Again, a lot of it is based on that, and the acceptance from the people as to what their future plans are.
So, you're an artist. How is growing up as an artist in Kenosha, developing as an artist, just locally, essentially, how has that been for your thoughts on Kenosha, your experiences here?
Everybody would keep telling me, you're never going to do well here, you won't make any money, you're going to be a starving artist because you got to go to Milwaukee, or or you have to go to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to Chicago and I've been to Milwaukee, and I think Kenosha's fine. There's other artists in the area. I was kind of held back a little bit because I went to a Catholic school and we didn't have an art teacher or art instructor. We just had one of the other staff members teach us art. So up until like 8th grade, I was not stifled, but just kind of held back a little bit. A lot of it was what I just learned on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of compliments from the teachers and my classmates, but when I went to the public school, they had a bona fide art teacher. And then so Lance, Tremper, Parkside, Carthage, I learned a lot in the public school art program. Then I taught for 21 years art education, and taught for the Kenosha Art Association as well. And now I'm retired and still doing art, and it's fun because now I can do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. Although I do get some jobs here and there where people need it by a certain time, but everybody seems to like the work. But it was an unusual path to get from, here we go again, A to B to C, but everything worked out. Had some very, very good instructors at Parkside and some good instructors at Carthage.
And you made it all work in Kenosha, not Milwaukee,
Yes.
Chicago.
Yep. I was wondering whether I would have to go outside the city or look for a job in Milwaukee or elsewhere and Racine, but there were openings, so it worked well for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Being able to do an artistic work in this city when you're between, two big, huge metropolitan areas too. It's great.
I went to Lance Junior High School,
Mm-hmm.
and for 9th grade, and then I was one of the first students from Lance to go back and teach there. So that was kind of a unique situation. Had cousins, brothers, neighbors, a lot of people in class that I knew, so that made it a little easier.
So essentially, you were part of, was it Kenosha Unified back then too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Brand new buildings, St. Mary's, the addition they put on for like 7th and 8th graders, 6th, 7th, 8th, brand new building. Lance, a relatively new building. Tremper, new building. Parkside, brand new. Electricians were walking down the aisles when I was going to my classes.
Mm-hmm.
Carthage was other buildings, but they were housing, dormitories, things like that. The school parts were basically in place. But yeah, new facilities, very good instructors. I think I did well for myself. I tried to pay attention.
Okay. For just, you're in the school system, for 21 years is how long you taught, right? How has schooling changed in Kenosha? That's an interesting, did not know you'd been a teacher before, and like an art teacher. So how has school been an experience in Kenosha? How was teaching in Kenosha?
Well, my first year was at Bullen, and then the last 20 were at Lance, and Bullen was an integrated school.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a learning experience in itself. I couldn't go into school the first week or so because I was 73 and there was a major teacher strike then. So here I am, fresh out of college, and I'm striking. And eventually when you get in the school, then it was a delayed experience of, the integrated students. And it was neat, it was fun. It was cool to start there. Lance was a lot different. Lance was a big difference. So, and a little more comfortable. Knew some of the teachers because they were my teachers, so I kind of lucked out that way.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And it was a newly integrated school. That was the first one you were
Yes.
going for as well.
Yep.
Okay. When I think of integration, I always think down south. I don't think much up north, but then we talk about Milwaukee and integration and all that. So how was that experience being a teacher at a newly integrated school?
We had a fair one portion of the year. I don't know if it was in the spring or whatever, and I was drawing portraits. And one of the first portraits, I didn't get a lot of comers. And one of the first people that said, geez, John, maybe I can help you out, is another teacher on the staff, and she was black. And I don't think I had drawn a lot of blacks at that point. And then she takes her glasses off. They said, this is not going to look like her now. Because she took her glasses off. But I mean, it turned out okay. She liked it. And I played in a basketball game, a student-faculty basketball game, and then I touched the rim. And boy, that scored a lot of points for me. Monday, when I came back to school, the 7th graders would walk in the classroom looking at me like, we didn't know you could do that. We didn't know teachers did other things like that. Boy, you sure surprised, that sort of thing. That was kind of funny.
Wow.
But I got their attention, and I think I got a little more respect from them that way too. So that's Mr. Gehring. He could play basketball. So.
Wow. Is there anything else you'd like to just let people know, whether they be leadership in the community or just Kenosha in general? Anything else you'd like them to know?
We could talk about the picture right here.
All right. What about the picture?
This is a sketch I did of Bruce Lee, and he is Chinese on his father's side, and his mother is Chinese, and then her other half is English or German. Mm-hmm. You would think so. He's 75% Chinese and then 25% English or German. He was in Hong Kong. He spent a lot of time between Hong Kong and the U.S., and he wanted to go to a martial arts school, and China would not let you in a martial arts school unless you were 100% Chinese. He wasn't happy about it, and then he developed his own martial arts. I think it's Jeet Kune Do or Jeet Kune Do, and it's made him a lot of money and brought a lot of success to him, a lot of attention. That's his name in Chinese. Mm-hmm. And in the 60s, he did a lot of work with the movie studios. He taught Steve McQueen and some other actors how to do his type martial arts. And he made $275 an hour in the 1960s. So I think he did pretty well for himself, besides the movies that he had done as well.
$275 an hour sounds nice now.
Yes, $275 an hour. The studios predominantly paid him to teach these different actors that just to make it look like they weren't, they were knowledgeable on how to hold their hands and how to stand when they were doing scenes in films. So,
mm-hmm. Well, John,
similarity to me being only 50% Italian, but not being allowed to join the Italian clubs. That's what I'm bringing up. That's what happens, and it doesn't just happen to me. It happens to everybody. Everybody can have experiences like that, mm-hmm. whether it's ethnically or racially, or both. So,
yeah, that's a really interesting connection between the two of you. That's just not being allowed because not 100%.
I don't know. I'm guessing it may still be that way. China may have a society like that where they're not very, very, very accepting to other groups unless it means profit for them or trading or whatever.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for sitting down to talk with me. It's been a nice conversation.
Thank you.